But explain again what one warhead filled with sarin could do.
You know, one of these shells, and the standard shell the Syrians put this in, is a 122 millimeter shell, which goes standard artillery piece. And if they were to drop this into a dense area, into Damascus or a suburb of Homs or Hama, it doesn't matter which town, it would instantly kill 18,000 within the first few minutes.
Just
and
from
then
one,
it would go up from there.
One shell.
One single shell would immediately kill 18,000 people. This is a liquid. It's dispersed. It sticks on you. You get a little bit into your system, and you're dead.
Sanjay, what does it actually do to somebody who comes in contact with it?
Well, it affects these very particular receptors in the brain. And let me just preface by saying that, it is odorless, it is tasteless, and is colorless. So it's very hard to even know, that it's there because of those things. And also by touching it, as Bob was just talking about, but also by inhaling it or eating food or drinking water that's been contaminated with it, you can also get poisoned. So you see this is a substance that can affect you in many different ways, and you might not know that it's there. Just from top to bottom, if someone has been affected by it, it's sort of like the on switch in the body is stuck on. So your pupils, they start to become very constricted. You get headaches. You develop this flushing almost in your nose and your sinuses, so you become very congested. But ultimately, it's like the on switch is stuck on in your body. And ultimately, that can lead to convulsions in the body. And ultimately, your diaphragm, which allows you to breathe, as Bob again is describing, it's tough to talk about, but that diaphragm seizes up, and that ultimately leads to respiratory failure and death.
And there is an antidote, but I mean, how effective is it?
You have to give it very early. You have to give it almost right away, sometimes even protectively in a situation they talk about. You may remember when we were overseas in some of these places, Anderson, we were given these kits that had atropine in it, not just one vial, but a few. Again, as Bob mentioned, because you give it once and then you may have to give it again a few minutes later. It essentially sort of, the atropine, for example, works to sort of unstuck that on button. But it has to be given quickly if it's going to be given.
The other thing I found alarming, Bob, from what you and I talked about, is that, we think, okay, well, you can bomb these sites from the air and eliminate them, but that doesn't work.
Well, Anderson, it doesn't work because if you hit one of these sites, and especially if there's multiple shells at the site, it just disperses the material. So it's not like we can go in with pinpoint bombing and destroy them from the air, which would be ideal if we could, because it'll kill everybody in a wide swath of a city or a base.
So how do you have to do you have to dismantle this stuff on the ground?
You have to dismantle it. Apparently there are teams out there that could possibly go in at some point. They're 18-man teams, but you'd have to fight your way in. That's the problem. And we're talking about an invasion of Syria to really secure these sites. At the very last minute, they could move this stuff around. The intelligence is not perfect. The Syrians could explode it in the middle of an attack. You just don't know. And there are no good options for disposing of this stuff.
Is it known how much he has?
I don't know how much he has. For me, the important thing is, and I keep on getting this question, is, well, we heard this about Iraq, about they had weapons of mass destruction.
Right, people are skeptical about this. They said this is a pretext by some for getting involved in Syria.
It's not, Anderson. I assure you, the U.S. intelligence community was deep into Syrian VX and sarin. Their binary agents knows all about it. This is not being hyped at any level.
Let me just push back on that. I mean, if this stuff has existed in Syria for all the time that Assad's been in power and hasn't been used, why? And it seems to have been stored safely thus far. Where's the proof that it's been put into warheads, or how do we know for sure?
Well, that's the question. Has it in fact been put into warheads? Has it in fact been mixed? Sanjay could address this, but I believe you've got a couple weeks to use these things once it's been mixed. We also don't know at what point would the Assad regime resort to using sarin. It's my hypothesis, knowing the Alawites, that they will, if they start getting slaughtered, is very well could happen. They will use it.
Sanjay, for people who are at risk, I mean, in areas where Assad regime might use them or could use them or some other group, what can they do to protect themselves? Is there something you can do to protect yourself?
Yeah, I mean, presumably they don't have access to any of these medications, the atropine, for example. I mean, you got to get out of that area, which sounds really simplistic, but keep in mind this because it's odorless and tasteless, and very hard to detect in that way. You just have to get out of that area, and also because you can get poisoned again by ingestion, inhaling, or just simply touching it. It can be on your clothes, for example. Your clothes could be a vehicle. So you get out of the way. You take off your clothes or anything that may have been exposed to it. Soap and water. Try and rinse your body as much as possible. Also, one thing is that it tends to be a heavier gas as compared to what else is in that area, so it tends to linger closer to the ground. So simply trying to get to higher elevation can help. Again, these sound like very simplistic things, but there's really, short of the medication being given right away, there's really not much else you can do.